Welcome to the Cult of Honesty. I did get here a bit late, that is, in the studio, and so I apologize. I don't even know what the subject is about or the topic, but my wife and I had a wonderful time with our grandchildren this afternoon and this morning and yesterday. We have been teaching them how to swim. And so we've been doing a lot of diving, and we have our grandchildren diving at least 5 feet deep now, and they are picking up pennies on the bottom of the pool, things of that nature. And so tonight my ears are full of water. And
when you say they're diving, are you like taking their head and forcing them down under the water? Is that what you mean by that?
That's normally what we do.
Okay.
We
right.
force them down.
I got you.
That's exactly
it's the sensible
what we do.
thing to do.
And so after holding them down for a while, they do submit, and
that's good.
It makes it well.
Very good.
So we have one completely swimming, independent of everyone, and then that would be Rachel, and Gavin. He's coming along. He was able to swim approximately 25 to 30 feet without any help at all, and then
nice.
He had a bad episode on his own, and then he pulled back a little bit. But it's all about working with him, and so hopefully we can have a show in which we can work with each other, because I think that we can learn a lot from children. Children have the ability to teach us, in a sense, how we are acting, whether we're capable of having a conversation. And one of the things that was powerful is, after we got out of the pool and stated all kinds of things, there was just a lot of respect from the grandchildren shown towards us, because we like showing them a lot of respect. And treating them with a sense of security, giving them enough security to feel like they can say and do and explore and move forward and do things they've never done before. And so I don't know what your topic is about tonight, but I hope it's going to be interesting. I'm going to be hopefully listening, but it may be filtered through a lot of water.
I understand. So let's what I want to do is I want to bring Hangouts in, and I want to turn this over to Greg for just a moment. So Greg, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us what our topic is tonight.
Our topic today is warring ideas, how to and how not to go about differences of opinion. And that's in many different ways, but basically it's how to have a civil discussion even when you strongly disagree with one another on what's being said.
All right. Very good. So how to disagree respectfully, basically, is what we're talking about.
Yes.
All right. And I understand you have some bullet points there for us to touch on, etc. Why don't you kick it off for us then?
All right. Well, of course, this is a topic that I think needs more coverage throughout all of our lives, starting as just young children. As parents, we tell people to say sorry. We do things to sort of force our children to be civil, but we don't help them understand some of the more nuanced aspects of having a conversation. Even like the term argument is so often used to be understood as a shouting match or a fight. Whereas an argument in its traditional usage is just a given set of points to make a case for an idea. And I think that is really something that has fallen apart a lot in the age of the internet, more than anything else. So we have now more people than possibly ever before interacting and sharing their ideas in this huge, I mean, somewhat narcissistic world that we have of everybody having their own Facebook, Twitter, and every other kind of account to tell everybody how important what they have to think is. But nobody understands how, well, I shouldn't generalize that much. Very few people understand how to take criticism of what they have to say well, and how to criticize other people respectfully, and the difference between respecting a person and respecting ideas.
Before we get deep into this, I want to just welcome everybody, some back to the show, some to the show. We have one new face tonight. His name is Christopher Mott. How are you doing, Christopher?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Actually, it's pronounced Mowdy, as in howdy.
Mowdy.
With an M.
All right, very good. Why don't you just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a laboratory manager for a laboratory that studies the psychology of the sense of smell here in Philadelphia. I also have a master's in education from SUNY Buffalo for a program that I don't want to say is affiliated with, because I know that they don't like that, but is somehow, I don't know what a synonym for affiliated is, but is tethered to the Center for Inquiry in Amherst, New York, which is a secular humanist think tank. And the name of the name of the degree that I have in a master's in education is Science in the Public, which is informal science education. So I have an interest in, ensuring that the criteria of science is not denigrated in any way, shape, or form. And I am an atheist. And I was originally gotten in touch with Greg because of my concerns about the presuppositional argument, which is out of my league, if you will, because it is a philosophical argument. But I was interested in that because I followed Eric Hovind's father, Kent Hovind, who really made some egregious scientific claims and assertions. So that's why I got into the whole creationist argument.
Very
that's
good.
how I found out about Center for Inquiry. That's how I got into the program, this, that, and the other.
I understand also that you always want to be kissed goodnight.
Wait, how can I do this so that everyone can see it? Which hand works? Here we go. For
Well-
everyone to see. This is my Vanna White.
My wife has the exact same thing on the wall in our bedroom. So just so that I know. Okay, and with us also are Bob Graves. Hi, Bob.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And Brian, how are you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
Brian Fields. And then we have Julie Button. How are you doing, Julie? You're muted, Julie. There we go. All right, and then finally we have Daryl Furlow from our NCG Texas studio. How are you doing, Daryl?
Doing good. Good to be here.
Excellent.
Can I make a point about Reverend Bob?
Sure.
that I'm personally offended that he's no longer showing his Hofner bass.
Oh, it's wrapped up because I'm playing tomorrow.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous I can't even speak. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm playing at Highland Park on July 4th from 3 to 5.
And you're using an actual Hofner bass.
Yes.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Okay.
I got a real Gretsch back there too. Like,
I know you have a fantastic guitar collection, but maybe I'll gush over it offline.
All right, guys. Greg, now that I've gotten you completely off track, I'm going to turn it back over to you to get us back on track and moderate the conversation.
All right. Well, I think the best way to go about this one is to sort of just leave it up or leave it open quick to say what should we not do. Everybody's got an example or an idea of things that they pet peeves that people do in conversations. So at that, I'm just going to throw out the question and see what everybody has to say. What should we avoid? Anyone? Show of hands.
Yeah. Take it personally.
Elaborate.
that's-
Elaborate for us, Christopher.
Oh, sure. I mean, almost every rudimentary argument I see between fundamentalists or Christians and atheists starts with what each person sees as the death knell of the other person's argument. And it's like, no, that's not going to work. And then when the other person refutes it, the other person takes it personally and then begins an ad hominem arguments.
So ad hominem is another one that we're
Ad hominem, absolutely.
adding there. And for those anybody viewing them might not know, ad hominem is a personal attack that has nothing to do with nothing to do with something that could actually be related to it, as in an attack on character.
So
Showing
what
some
is, I want to ask this question because this is something that I've kind of struggled with in my mind for some time. What is an ad hominem? For example, when I'm arguing with someone, I could say, well, nobody should listen to you because you're an idiot. That is a blatant ad hominem. It has nothing to do with what's being discussed. Or I could say, no one should listen to you because you're a Christian. And disqualifying people because of who they are
That's ridiculous.
is very misleading, and you're right, it's very ridiculous. But what if I said, and I'm going to quote my good friend Greg here, or I'm going to paraphrase, what if I said, to believe what you are purporting is borderline sociopathic? Is that an ad hominem?
No, that is a assessment of a particular style of thought. If you think that you are your thoughts, then you can take it personally. But you're
Very
not your
good.
thoughts.
Very good. And I probably shouldn't have used that example because I don't want to appear to be. I was joking because he said that to me recently.
And Joey immediately went, "Whoa, we're busting out the ad hominems." Huh?
It's a Brayism.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do want to point out that there are shades.
But it was easily disassembled.
Okay, but there are shades of gray as far as what an ad hominem is, because I could say, for example, I could say, nobody should listen to you because you are borderline, or because you are a Christian, or I could say, nobody should listen to that because it is a Christian thought.
Okay, so you're tiptoeing around what's called poisoning the well.
Elaborate, please.
So poisoning the well is because you're a Christian and you have that thought, and Christians apparently have thoughts that are faulty. Your thought is faulty.
Right.
It's an offshoot of hasty generalization.
Say that again, Brian.
It's an offshoot of hasty generalization. It's a way to use a generalization to influence someone against a particular point of view.
So how do we deal with in a conversation? How do we deal with those moments when somebody knows that they shouldn't be using an ad hominem, but they are trying to say everything else except an ad hominem?
Before we go into that, I wanted to make one more point about what is and what is not an ad hominem, because you brought up, like, nobody should listen to you because you're an idiot. That is a very clear example of an ad hominem. However, there's also something to be said. A lot of people will take it as an ad hominem if you say, nobody should be listening to you because you don't know what you're talking about. Is similar in many ways. It sounds very much the same, but if it's being used in a way that somebody is pretending or attempting to play the role of an expert and actually has no idea what they're talking about, then it comes off as an ad hominem, but in reality it's an assessment of their
History.
their demonstrated expertise.
I agree, and you know what? That really isn't what I'm trying to get at here. I think the Christian example is a much better one. When we compare telling making the argument that they're wrong because of who they are, versus making their saying that they're wrong because of what they're saying, and it's much more respectful to point out that they're losing the argument because of what they're saying. But at the same time, sometimes this can be just a way of avoiding an ad hominem but saying the same thing. Can it not?
Definitely.
Go ahead, Julie.
That's absolutely true, and especially when you say something like "because you're a Christian," because that's 2 billion people, and 2 billion people don't all have exactly the same idea of what it means to be a Christian, nor do they have the same set of beliefs. And so to just, that's a perfect example of just I can't come up with the word that it's a perfect example of, but it doesn't even mean it. You are not to be believed because you are a Christian. That's not a definitive label. So it's okay.
Well, it really doesn't have anything to do with whether it's a definitive label or not, but the fact that attacking somebody because you are a Christian or you are an atheist or you are whatever when it has nothing to do with the conversation at hand. An ad hominem is a bit of a sleight of hand to
Right.
make someone upset rather than address the argument or discussion that's at hand.
Exactly, and I'm just saying something like you are a Christian because it's so broad. That's not like saying because.
Even if it was specific, if I said because your last name is Button, then the point of it, I think, as Brian touched on there, is it relevant to the conversation? I mean, for me to say because you're a Christian, because your last name is Button, because I know your kids, it doesn't matter unless it matters. It's something that it certainly can be brought up, and there are things that can be stated that you wouldn't. For example, let's say they going back to the Christian example, saying that you don't understand the perspective of atheism because you're a Christian. Then it's relevant to some extent. I mean, it's not a complete dismissal as long as it is relevant to what we're actually talking about.
Yes, but being a Christian doesn't disqualify you necessarily from understanding atheism. So that would not be. I mean, that is a bit of an ad hominem, I would think, because you are trying to disqualify a person because of
that was off the
who they
cuff.
are.
It wasn't a perfect analogy.
No, I mean, everything we're talking about assumes that there's a level playing field where everybody's on the same page about the fact that what you're talking about in the discussion is based on the merit of your argument.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
So any appeal to emotion, which is the umbrella term under which an ad hominem argument kind of exists, is BS. Like it's a carnival trick, kind of something that Greg and I were talking about pre-show. It's kind of a way, it's an appeal to emotion that kind of might be more effective as a trick as compared to as a genuine, logistical, defensible argument.
Right.
Our group does an annual conference that's for atheists and humanists every year. And last year's conference, we had a speaker. Her name is Nicole Caravan. She's a neuropsychologist out in Pittsburgh, and she spoke about how the brain reacts in a conversation when you're dealing with a potentially contentious conversation. And just a brief overview. There's three general areas of your brain that interact when you're interacting with other people. You have the prefrontal cortex. That's your reasoning center of your brain. You have the limbic system, which is the emotional core of your brain, and then you have the amygdala, which is kind of the gatekeeper between the two. And when you feel threatened, like say in a personal attack, for example, your amygdala actually shuts down or scales down your prefrontal cortex and scales up your limbic system, which means that you go into your flight, fight, there's other F's in there, system, anyway, but the point is that when you get somebody in a discussion into a threatened mode, they aren't engaging their reasoning centers anymore. And so engaging in an argument, engaging in personal attacks is a very poor way to communicate with somebody to begin with. Never mind the fact that in reasoning, that ad hominems are just considered irrational to begin with.
But is it an ad hominem for me to say, well, you are a racist?
Possibly not, but probably a bad idea.
In some ways, it's context dependent, would you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that did you ever see the movie on the Frost interview with Nixon? I thought it was awesome the way that Nixon put David Frost off just before they go on the air. They're about ready to go live.
Emotional, by triggering him in an emotional state, he wasn't able to engage his prefrontal cortex anymore.
Right. He talked to him about something about, so did you fornicate today?
Yeah. Exactly.
Totally sets him off balance so that he can't function because he's too busy emotionally coming back balance.
Right.
Joey, that's how you and I should open up course from here on out. Did you fornicate today?
Let me ask. Let me ask this question: how should we approach a dissenter, somebody who's speaking to us that doesn't agree with us? How should we deal with those moments when these fallacious arguments, these distracting tactics like ad hominems and others are being used against us? Is the best tactic to always point them out?
Not necessarily.
Well, I think that leads into some of the other questions that had come up with this is not just what to avoid, but also what to try to do and when to know when to duck out, or how to know when to duck out.
I mean, I recently had a conversation with a gentleman who was basically winning favor in the eyes of his audience by accusing me of lying and making misleading statements, and it wasn't true. But I chose not to defend myself. I chose not to say, that isn't true. You're saying I said this, but what I actually said was this. I chose not to respond, but to pretend like he didn't say it, and I just continued with the points that I was trying to make. Eventually, I stopped talking because I didn't feel like it was a fruitful place to even have a conversation.
Context is important. You don't want to, if somebody's attacking you in the context of a debate where you've got someone observing two sides, a debate isn't always something that is a reasoned interchange. There's a lot of times where emotional tricks are used to convince the audience because the goal isn't always to logically win over your opponent. The goal is to make points with the audience. So if the person you're debating with has more gravitas with their audience, you might get stuck and it might be worth withdrawing at that point in time. But if you're in a one-on-one conversation with somebody and the goal of that conversation is to exchange ideas, then I think the approach has to be more trying to keep their prefrontal cortex engaged by avoiding the personal attacks. And if they're personally attacking you, to be assertive in standing your ground, but by the same token, be willing to give and take a little bit.
I'd just like to make a quick statement that the atheists are outnumbering the crap out of the theists in this conversation today.
Wonderful.
Kudos to everybody. Welcome to the dark side.
I forgot I was going to say. It's really important.
And Greg, why did you choose to take this strange and immature turn in this conversation?
Because this would be the bandwagon fallacy, right? The appeal to popularity. That look how many atheists there are that want to talk about this. We must be right.
Wouldn't it be great if every time we were arguing, if we could sneak in ad hominems, and then if somebody called us on it, we could just say, "Hey, I just wanted everybody to know what it was like. I just want."
This was just an example. So, but there's a flip side to the ad hominems. It's not just don't use them. The other side of it is, of course, ad hominems are and other debate tactics are they're designed, as Brian so eloquently pointed out, to piss you off. They're supposed to set you into an emotional state, and when you get into an emotional state, you become less rational, and you often respond in kind. Once again, the fight or flight technique, and that's something that we need to be aware of as well for avoiding ourselves. When somebody does something that upsets you or offends you, we need to be, and I know I've found myself in this situation more than a handful of times where I realize that I've got a comment that I just posted, and I'm like, wow, that was really rude and disrespectful. I admittedly in return to somebody who just disrespected me, but I don't want to perpetuate this.
Mhm. Yeah, I just posted one today to Kat and had to apologize for it.
Well, that's an awkward silence. Let's keep this
Kat,
conversation
I think you
going.
are muted. Kat was trying to say something, but I think she's muted.
No, it's true and
No,
real.
sometimes you have to teach people how to treat you. That's why
Exactly.
I don't like the eye for an eye, and I don't like the turn the other cheek. You've got to go with a balance. You need to go somewhere in between that. And if somebody is attacking you, you tell them that is not okay. You let them know that's not all right. You don't do that.
Does anger have any place or value in a conversation?
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Not always, but sometimes.
I hear two
I'm
yeses
interested
sometimes.
to get Sarah's opinion on this. Sarah, are you able to talk, or are you just listening in this one? This is your opportunity to chime in.
Yeah, we can't hear you if you're speaking, Sarah. And
She's having trouble.
we also
She
can't
just put
see
in the
you.
chat she's having trouble.
Okay.
Won't let her talk.
Now I heard some yeses and some sometimes in answer to my questions. Let's make this conversation interesting. What do we mean by yes? What do we mean by sometimes? Just jump in.
Does anger have a place?
When does anger have a place? When does anger have a
Passion has
constructive
a place.
to show your passion? That's what you're saying.
Passion has a place. Anger is a manifestation of passion that maybe we can rein in.
So
Yeah,
so
the
controlled
anger-
anger.
I think anger can sometimes help you learn what it's every emotion is a tool, and it can help you learn with knowing that something's bothering you. It's a message being brought to you about how you feel, and it needs to be paid attention to.
Is it possible? Is it possible to experience anger in the middle of a conversation without losing even some degree of rationality?
Oh, sure.
Do you believe in mindfulness?
What do you mean?
In which sense? I mean, explain. I mean, mindfulness to you. What does that mean? Like, in a sense of
Are you able to
paying attention
separate?
to-
Are you able to separate the experience of my heart is racing, my adrenal glands are pumping out adrenaline, and I'm experiencing something that is what people would call anger, but I'm not going to respond to it in the way that people would normally respond to as anger. I'm just going to acknowledge that it is anger and respond to it in a different way. I'm going to pivot off of what my acknowledgement is of it in my mindful way. That's mindfulness.
Absolutely, especially in a written form.
Also, we need to own our anger. All anger is the result of our perceiving something that we value as being attacked or treated unjustly. And there's a sense here in which, for example, what if somebody is speaking to me and they're actually attacking me and I feel anger? First of all, I think that many times we too much assume that it's wrong to have anger. If I value myself, I think it's perfectly fine for me to feel anger over being attacked. But that doesn't mean I have to do anything about it. If I recognize that anger is a result of my feeling attacked and I feel that I am valuable, then there's a sense in which I'm more than happy to be angry and to reaffirm my value to myself. So, but if I feel that I'm not supposed to be angry and you've made me angry, now what the hell am I going to do? Because now I'm angry. You've derailed yourself. Whereas, own your anger as your own. It's a package deal. You can't value what you value and not have anger when what you value is violated. It's that simple. And so if you experience it as a personal affirmation of your values, then it's fine, and you can move on from there without having to respond to it. Respond to it if it's wise. Don't respond if it's not wise. But if you have anger at something, just be angry.
What
I think
what is anger? Is it only an expression of fear, or is it something else?
no.
Frustration.
I'd like to get Nick's opinion on this for a couple reasons. One, the argument, or sorry, the question of does anger have a place in an argument? Nick is somebody who I've seen get very passionate about an argument and show that something does upset him, but not become vitriolic or start spitting acid with it. So
That's because part of his brain
that's
was
a-
removed.
Right. That's the lobotomy does that.
Right.
for people,
Helps
but,
a lot.
and thankfully Nick might be able to understand exactly or explain exactly how that affected his brain. So
Go.
yes,
You have to turn your mic
you're
on.
muted.
You're muted.
This is just another expression
Yeah.
of his lobotomy, people.
You're not muted. It's,
Which speaking of lobotomies and also anger, there's a good quote that I think you all should learn to be able to repeat. I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy.
Lobotomy. Oh, nice.
Don't do that anymore.
wah 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 wah.
I'm here all week.
Exactly.
Nick, let us know when you
Nick.
think you might be able to send sound our way. We'd like to hear. We'd like for you to jump into the conversation.
We can't hear him.
Yeah, apparently there's too many people for us to let other people talk now. That's
All right, I'm muting.
there's
My
8
screen
people
just
in.
said Julie Button muted Nick Albertini. I don't know how that could happen.
I think she was trying to unmute him.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is your mute? Try to mute yourself and unmute yourself, Nick. No. Okay.
Try.
Don't speak down to me, sir. Okay.
Don't gesture down to me like that.
Have
Very
I still
condescending.
Maybe we'll see him get angry.
Condescension. That's another one that we hadn't covered yet.
No, I
Sorry.
didn't disappear.
He's going to come back, see if he can make that work.
Okay, I'll
All right, let's talk about him while he's gone. No.
When is it time to walk away from a conversation?
When it's apparent that the threat mode is so engaged in the person you're speaking with that it's impossible to get them to engage in any rational manner.
Nice.
Yeah. I can't
What
imagine.
about
Go ahead.
what about when the other person is obviously not following those rules that you've said about what an argument is and what an argument isn't, and they're throwing out. At what point do you determine that it is time to walk away from it? This is not a real discussion. And that's what I remember what Brian had talked about. An argument is an exchange of ideas, and when you recognize that the other person is not participating in an exchange of ideas, I mean, at what point do you identify that?
Well, I think that the hallmark of a rational conversation, I mean, usually there's an element of charity to it, an element
Sure.
of interchange where, you'll say something and you can see that they're listening. And maybe if they don't know the rules for having a rational discussion, maybe there's an opportunity to educate them on it in a polite and rational way. But if none of that is working, if you aren't getting any kind of interchange and you can see that there's no way to pull it into the realm of the rational, then at that point you have to say something like, I'm sorry, I don't see how we're going to get anywhere in this conversation.
But Brian, as nice as you could possibly be, they can appeal to emotion and make you look silly.
Let them. I don't have my ego. I'm out in public all the time. I do tabling events where I set up a table with atheist merchandise and materials and stuff, and people come up to me all the time. So I clearly
So you've built Teflon against that.
For me, I
Nice.
don't have my ego wrapped up in these types of conversations. If it's not a rational conversation, I can walk away from it and it doesn't bother me at all. And I even recently we had one of our tabling events and a couple of Mennonites came up to our table and they started going in about how not only did they say that atheists don't have a source of morality, but they said explicitly atheists were immoral. And of course, I had to take issue with those statements. But
Sure.
when engaging in the interchange, though, not only did I explain that, but I stopped the conversation to try to get them to see from my perspective how something like that would actually be downright offensive.
Yeah, or you could just say, "Is that really safe for you to say to me?"
Well, I wanted them to feel safe to say,
Look at me.
well, in what I do, part of my goal is to try to make people feel safe to say really stupid things to me sometimes. So,
Yeah. Well, if it's any consolation, I find that the Christian mentality, and I am a theist, the Christian mentality, I think, even short circuits the moral compass of a lot of people. And the atheists that I've known who truly struggle with questions of ethics tend to be more authentic and genuine with them, in my opinion, because they're really dealing with them. Whereas, in my opinion, most Christians tend to deal with these things as if they're merely prescriptive.
right.
Mm-hmm. All of us usually think most of the time that what we believe and and the words that are coming out of our mouth are rational thoughts. Most of the time we believe that. So when we're speaking with well, I'll let you elaborate on that in a moment. But when we are speaking with somebody, how do we tell the difference between when they're being irrational and when they're just continuing to disagree with us?
If I can, real quick.
Certainly.
One of the things that it also pertains to the last question about how can you tell when it's time to end it is when people are bringing up other things that are really irrelevant to the conversation that you're having, and they start changing the subject and changing the subject matter, and bringing in things that are unnecessary to what the discussion is. And obviously they're upset. So that is really a sign for me to say, I'm not doing this.
Sure.
Okay, I'm done.
I think most people with a modicum of empathy can tell when people are engaging in an argument from pure emotion rather than a rational point of view. I mean, it's hard, obviously, to quantify all of the possible signals that somebody could possibly get, but I think it comes from a place of, is there a give and take in the conversation from both sides? Is there, is charity being shown in the conversation? Is somebody allowing a point of view that without taking it personally, or at least signals of when it might be time to disengage?
Sure. I think that the word that you're dancing around, Brian, is patience. A good conversation takes a lot of patience, and sometimes I find that when I think that somebody's being irrational, that they're just continuing to disagree with me. Sometimes I find that if I listen longer than my gut is telling me they're being irrational, that I might hear what they're actually saying, and I might change my mind.
It's which version of irrationality?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody has a perfect set of logic in their mind or a perfect rational mode that is always, perfectly sane, perfectly rational. I think that communication is a challenging thing, and if we and to Kat's point as well, sometimes I will hear somebody and it seems like they're not listening to me. It seems like they're talking about things that are irrelevant. A lot of times that's true, but sometimes I find that if I listen for just a little bit longer, that I find the connection that they're making that I just didn't see before. And not correcting you at all, Kat. I agree with what you're saying, but it's very hard to discern these things without having a lot of patience, don't you think?
I find it's often true when I'm listening to Joey.
I'm sorry. I had an interruption and I had to walk away. So Joey, you didn't see I wasn't here. So I really didn't hear the conversation before that. I apologize.
Can we mute Bob? Is it possible to just mute him permanently? Or is it,
No, there is something though that needs to be stated about who you're arguing with and the level of familiarity and things as well. I mean, Joey and I do the show Clash Course, where he and I will argue with each other about a different topic every week. And by the way, anybody here or anybody watching that would like to replace either of us at any point, you're more than welcome to. The idea with that is that Joey and I are placeholders. So if you got axe to grind, bring it to Clash Course. But Joey and I know each other pretty well, and as such, jab at each other and make fun of each other, and we can feign condescension and superiority and things. And I mean, of course, Joey knows that
he's wrong.
Is inferior to me intellectually, and that makes it easier.
It's easier to tell when you're talking and having a conversation and you see another person.
Oh no!
And that's
that in text.
I think there probably was a point in there somewhere.
Right. What I was going to say is
yeah, that was purely just a jab at me. There was no other reason for Greg to speak.
Gratuitous awesomeness.
Yeah, I knew I had to be here. I was ripped apart if I wasn't.
There's something to be said both for the level of familiarity and for the format, because we are using Hangout, where we can see each other's faces, hear the intonation in our voices, and tell when something is a joke or meant to be in jest. It makes it easier to have these kinds of conversations and to make comments like that. Whereas in specifically the text format, sarcasm, I mean, there's a great need for a sarcasm font.
That would spoil the point of sarcasm.
Well,
it's true, but would it? I mean, it's fun to do.
Greg, there's another factor, and I'm going to go there.
Okay, let's go there.
when it is especially when it is a woman dealing with men that are very theistic, and their mentality, it's not only that I am
it's always about gender for you, isn't it, Kat?
It's not only that I am an atheist, but I am an atheist outspoken woman. So I have had that.
So they hate you on 3 levels.
I have had
does that make you an atheist
on several occasions.
An atheist what?
Does that make you an atheist plus?
I'm ducking that one.
Outspoken. I speak my mind. I'm very strong, and I speak my mind. I'm a very outspoken woman, and I have been told that, especially when it comes to theists, it's not something that I experience a lot in the secular movement, but I experience it a lot when I'm dealing with this. So if I'm in a group such as yours, and I don't know who somebody is, and they're making a crack at me, I don't know where that crack is coming from. So there has to be, a different level of respect. And if I am being disrespected just because I'm a woman in some of the cases that I have dealt with
Kat,
before,
can I ask where you're from? Like the general area?
California, LA.
Okay. And is that where you were born and raised?
I was, except I actually lived in Alabama for a year.
And on the playground, is that where you spent most of your days?
Pardon me?
And on the playground, is that where you spent most of your days? Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool?
The only reason why I ask is because I live in Philadelphia, and we have a busting chops mentality that may not translate.
A lot.
Right.
No, I think what Kat is getting at is, I think what Kat is getting at is a level of sensitivity that exists in us all. If we don't know another person, it doesn't matter where we're from. We have no idea where they're coming from. When you're among people of even, you don't even have to be good friends. You can just be among people of a similar culture, and you know where they're coming from. But if you are around people of a different culture than you, or somebody that you're not friends with, or somebody of a different religious or philosophical orientation, there is a moment at the beginning of that relationship where you have no idea what they mean sometimes when they say things. If they're being if they're attacking you, or if they're being sarcastic, or if they're making a joke. And And Dr. Jones has said on more than one occasion that effective communication is impossible between two people who don't like each other.
I don't think that's true.
I don't believe that.
I disagree strongly with that, actually.
What-
I have a lot of productive conversations with people I really, really don't like, and it happens all the time. But I think it requires an element of disassociation where you can have a conversation without engaging your emotional centers. So I agree that it may be difficult, but I don't agree that it's impossible.
Yeah, I can even admire the loyalty that somebody has based on a value I can understand when I disagree with them and dislike them. I can even find that it admirable. So I think it is very possible to have a productive conversation with someone you don't like. Let's hope that it is possible, because this world definitely needs a number of conversations between a number of people who do not like each other.
Don't you think it's really based on whether or not you have an inquisitive mind?
The skill and openness of the people involved is very essential, I think, yes.
I mean, it may be important to talk about what the word like means here, because I really don't see a way to communicate with somebody unless on some level I enjoy talking with them, or I enjoy the challenge of the conversation. There's something there that I have to like, I have to appreciate. Otherwise, I'm not interested in pursuing that conversation.
If you like the reality of being human, and I think it was Brian who was talking about that, your thoughts are not you. They're just a particular perspective you're currently holding on to. If you can really enjoy people as being people, even though they may be holding on to ideas or behaviors or problems, there is a level, I think, in which you can really connect with something that you really like about people, that you dislike their behavior, you dislike their attitude, or you dislike something.
Sure. But Bob, you made a statement a moment ago. You said, and I'm going to have to paraphrase the idea of what you're saying. I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like we're in a lot of trouble if we can't communicate with people that we don't like. And what I heard in that statement was that the goal in the conversations that you're talking about is to come to some sort of place of agreement, some sort of place of understanding. Is that correct?
Some connection.
Okay. Doesn't that imply that on some level you already like that person, if only on some small level or place?
It might imply that at some level you discover that they are authentically human. I mean, think about like Palestinians and Israelis. I don't see how it's possible for them to have a productive discussion among themselves until they both realize that the suffering of the other side is very real to them.
Right.
Very personal.
Maybe though
that is a level of liking.
Well,
maybe it would be better if we substituted the word respect.
Respect, yes.
I don't even know if you actually need respect for the person. I think you do. I mean, it's certainly helpful. Don't get me wrong, but I think that it's more important that sometimes if there is a goal to the conversation that isn't necessarily tied up in the communication, or I'm sorry, in your like of the person, but in the need to accomplish something with that person. So if there's a common goal in a conversation that you're trying to reach, like if we could get the Palestinians and the Israelis to sit down at a table, they don't have to like each other to realize, hey, those people have to live together and they have to find out some way to come to that conclusion. That you could despise the person at the other end of the table and still work towards that goal. You have to have a shared goal, though.
Yes, but isn't that a short-term goal built on self-interest?
Yes.
Well, how long is a goal? How long is an accomplishment built solely on self-interest going to last? How long is any sort of peace going to last between two people who disdain each other?
As long as I am alive, I'll have a certain degree of self-interest, I'm sure.
I'm not saying that we don't have self-interest. I'm just saying, how can any solid communication be built between two people who disdain one another?
Let's hope it would lead more.
What was that?
You're just going to my point, Bob, which is that there must be a goal that leads towards a liking. And you can say respect if you want, but I'm talking about an acknowledgement that these people are like me in many ways. They have the same needs that I do. They may have different beliefs, but we need to communicate. And there's no way for us to make any headway unless on some level I can like that person.
This is the
Then
philosophy
you're
of Dr.
using an
Martin Luther.
idiosyncratic definition.
Yeah.
So work with that and just accept that
Say-
you're using
say it
an
again?
idiosyncratic definition.
I'm using a syncretic definition. What do you mean?
Idiosyncratic definition.
Can you explain,
Liking.
please?
Your definition of liking
Unusual.
is unusual. So work with that, accept it, and just move on.
You know, Dr. Martin Luther King, in his speech, today we hear it, and I don't think it sounds as radical to us as it did in the day. Back in the 60s, when we're having the riots that are going on in New Jersey, and where the racial tension was extremely high, and the anger and the dislike was at a peak of justified righteousness, and for him to be saying that I have a dream of, you know, the black man and the white man sitting down together as brothers. My goodness, what a goal he had. And to me, that was just an amazing speech and so radical in its day. And I do think that it is helpful as in a goal for people who are different to have that goal of being able to. It's so helpful. If they can have that goal of wanting to sit down as brothers, that can be very helpful.
Okay.
I think it also has to do with, even if you can find, going back to what somebody had said about, don't you have to end up liking someone in order to make something long term? Not as long as you can continue with some, even if you call it enlightened self-interest, but some way of discovering that, you know what, it really is in my best interest to be able to engage with this other person in whatever common need we have.
Sure.
I don't think it's valid then to say, well, I like the person, I may hate them, and I may not want to spend any time with them whatsoever if I can get away with it. But I have to do it because I have to accomplish this one goal that we both share.
But there is no doubt, and I don't think anybody here would say that between two people who like each other, there is much more possible to accomplish between two people who don't. And so what I'm driving at here is that there is, if that is clear, there should be a clear shade of gray from fully liking someone to only liking them a little bit, liking some part of them. Before we turn this back into a free for all, I do want to ask Sarah Moorhead to jump in the conversation a little bit, because it looks
Sarah
like
and Nick both have working
it
microphones.
looks like they're
And
back in.
also,
So
Daryl hasn't said anything for quite some time.
right. So let's hear from those three. Sarah, let's start with you.
Well, I think, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. I think when you guys are trying to debate on what the word is that we're looking for, when we're talking about, you know, how we interact with people, and are we trying to find common ground, or are we trying to find that we like someone, and in what capacity, and all those things. I tend to think of it as just more empathy. I mean, can we put ourselves in their situation, and can we understand their perspective? We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to think their conclusions are right or accurate. But I think when I have those conversations with fundamentalists, and I talk to them quite regularly, that's really what I do, is say, okay, how far do I have to back up here so that we can find something that I can say, I know where you're coming from, whether it's my own experience or just listening to them and putting myself in their shoes. And I think that all just comes down to empathy, really.
Yes.
So that just sounded like what we were talking about is, you know, how do we disagree with people? How do we have this conversation where we don't see eye to eye on things? And I think it boils down to basic empathy.
Sure. Daryl, why don't you jump in?
Well, Nick was going to go ahead. I'll go ahead. I'm enjoying the conversation mainly because it seems like everyone is coming from the same perspective, and maybe this was the way that Greg worded things. I don't know, but it's as if everyone is trying to say how to approach someone in a way that we can communicate and exchange ideas successfully. And my thought was, that's not nearly always the case, and it's certainly not. I mean, it's obvious from most of the ones that I've heard speak that when you're engaging in conversation, that's not always the response that you get. And of course, the question does have to do with how do we approach in a way that will create an atmosphere for communication. But I love the ideas that have been expressed, and I did want to say something directly to Kat, but actually it really will apply to everyone on the Hangout. But that I'm a theist, and I will admit I'm a theist that's gone through a lot of changes. There was a time when what she said, I would have probably been, I would consider myself to have been a bigot. And a woman who speaks her mind, I don't want to hear that. But I can say now that I appreciate anyone who speaks their mind. And that's why I find myself as a member of this cult of honesty here. If we can't be honest with one another, speak our minds, then we're not really speaking. We're trying to veil our speech, I guess. And so, I just want you to know, as a theist, Kat, I appreciate the fact that you speak your mind. I think that's wonderful. And I love to hear it.
And I really appreciate that you acknowledged that at one point you didn't feel that way. So it's really nice of you to say that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Nick,
You bet. I'll be honest.
let's try your mic again. Are you working? Nick, this is your opportunity. Time is narrow. Nick, let us hear from you, Nick.
Yeah. We're waiting, Nick. Come on.
Come on, Nick. We're really excited about what you have to say. All right.
If we were all theists here, we might say, well, maybe
Okay.
God doesn't want him to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know where Greg went, but we have just a few minutes left in the show. I'm going to turn this back over to a free for all. So if you guys want to pick up the conversation and jump back in, feel free to.
I'd like to give an example of a difficult conversation I had with someone that was not easy to like. I used to work with an organization where we worked with people who had sexual addictions. And one of the people that I spoke to was a pedophile. And I had a very long conversation with him trying to get an understanding of where he was at and where he's coming from. And I really think I was able to kind of get inside his head and understand his perspective as much as I just totally rejected it. I felt very bad for the fellow. He was headed for trial. And I could tell from talking to him that he genuinely believed that these little children were sexually active, were sexually thinking, and that he even felt genuinely seduced and tricked into the crime for which he'd been charged. But it was such a strange thing to talk to this person who had a different view of reality. But nonetheless, in speaking to him, I felt that I came to a deeper understanding of the dynamic of pedophilia, which was helpful to me in the work that I was doing, and extremely sad. But I don't think it would have been possible for me to have had that productive conversation with him if I had not been able to set aside the natural sense of repulsion over what's going on inside of him.
Good point.
All right. Does anybody want to make a closing statement before we wrap up the show?
there's there's one more thing that I wanted to say on this subject, and that was what I think is a goal that we can have anytime the conversation does get heated or somebody gets offended, or there's any sort of conflict that goes beyond just the intellectual conflict between ideas. And that is the one that I've always sought to use in personal relationships as well as online and in any other dynamic. And the goal for me is to diffuse the tension, never to escalate the situation. I found that, yes, sometimes you end up eating some crow or being the person who sort of takes on the whipping boy role, but it's very conducive to helping other people settle down, and it makes a huge difference in how productive a conversation can be.
All right.
That's all I've got.
Anyone else?
Well, I would like to say that I'm disappointed that we didn't get to hear from Nick. I always enjoy what he has to say.
Well, it was fun watching him try.
That's true. That's true. We'll let him speak a lot next go around. How's that?
As soon as we
he's
stop
very sad
broadcasting
right
on
now.
Ustream, it'll all work.
Nick is
fine
very
for
sad
him.
right now.
He's just been messing with us the whole time. He does this for attention.
Oh.
An ad hominem right there.
Oh, okay.
That's
So we shouldn't listen to him.
Looks like he's
right.
getting
Therefore,
angry.
we shouldn't listen to him. We shouldn't listen to him not talking.
That's different.
We should not listen to his silence.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up. Let's turn. Thank you so much for joining us, and feel free to continue the hangout as we end this show. But to all of you, we hope you'll join us again. It's been a great conversation, and it's good to see some new faces. And we hope to see you back again.
Yeah.
Let's pull the hangouts down on the show here, and I'm going to turn things back over to Dr. Jones.
I wish we would have had enough time to deal with what I was actually dealing with the issue of like. It's a very restricted use because it deals with linguistic identity and properties, and that wasn't actually addressed during the conversation here. However, I would like to ask the Hangout a particular question. I would like for all of the atheists in particular to answer this question. What kind of theist are the most difficult theists to have a conversation with? And if I could get those answers, we're going to go out on this question.
All right, Hangouts, you're back in.
Young Earth creationists.
Can you get more specific?
You want us to name names?
Yeah, I was going to say,
Well,
anything more specific than
okay,
that
I
is
don't mind
a
the
name.
names here, but let's do it in a respectful manner. I can understand young Earth creationists, fundamentalists, etc., but be more specific about what they are doing and why a conversation can't be had with them, and be very short.
Hold on, hold on just
we
a second,
can't
guys.
hear
We
you.
can't
Hold
hear.
on.
We can't hear
I've got
Hangouts.
this.
Nick first.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think the reason it's so difficult to have conversations with people of that kind of mentality, even though I think we all try really hard. I mean, conversation is about give and take. You have to have some acknowledgement of validity from the other side in order to perpetuate any conversation. And so when you're talking to people who are completely the young Earth creationist is a good example, but that fundamentalist, that they are completely right and no alternative is even possible. When you're dealing with that mentality, you can't get them to concede anything. So the conversation can't move forward because as you guys experienced a couple months ago when you had Cy and Eric on the show, once they lock into that one point, they will come back to that every single time. And it's a conversation stopper. There's no moving forward from that. So it's not even about how intelligent anyone is or how empathetic or anything because they just shut it down.
But
and they're not interested in that.
but do you know that, Sarah? Do you know that to be true?
No,
Could you be wrong about that?
Oh,
That was me.
But you could be
Nope.
wrong.
Sarah, let me ask you a question in particular, since you're answering this question so proficiently. In dealing with all of these people who are, in a sense, you're rescuing, who in particular are the hardest to rescue? These be the fundamentalists or people from the Episcopal Church, or what?
I tend to categorize them as the inerrant word mentality, and they don't. And you're probably familiar with this. They don't tend to identify themselves as fundamentalists, but it's inerrant word when they're saying there's absolutely no question that everything in the Bible is exactly right, the way they interpret it and the way they're going to apply it to their life, and there's no gray area in their mind.
That's a very
Since
broad
you're making that
category, but
statement, I
can
would
agree with
like
that.
to ask you to be on a show on the 21st of this month, because I'm going to do everything that I can to knock the legs out from underneath the whole idea of the authority of Scripture. I have some people coming on the show who are going to be defending that position. Let's go to another atheist on this. I think, Christopher, you were suggesting something. Would you speak?
I don't know which point that you were suggesting to.
Actually, my first point, which theist, which group of theists, or anybody in particular in that kind of category, are
of course, the young Earth creationists, because as I mentioned in my intro, the thing that got me interested in creation science or defending evolution was Kent Hovind, and it was his wonderful. I mean, he's fantastic at presenting wrong information at a slippery slope pace, in a carnival barker manner, that is just like it's so accessible that you can't deny it.
So, in other words, when you talk with people like that, it's almost like talking with a person who wants to give you a sermon, almost.
In order to deconstruct what he has to say, you need to engage in nuance that the listening audience does not want to engage in.
Right.
Right. Brian.
I don't know everybody, all the atheists' backgrounds here, but I actually grew up in fundamentalist Christianity. So I have some perspective when I'm talking to fundamentalist Christians. I honestly, I don't like to say that I have a particular worst person to talk to, although people who are completely unwilling to exchange ideas would, tend to be of the fundamentalist persuasion. But I'm quite comfortable conversing with them because I can usually find common ground in the conversation because I have that experience. So it perhaps doesn't upset me as much as it might upset others, but it does. But everybody's different.
So who among theists do you find the most difficult to communicate with?
There are particular questions.
The Japanese.
Do you know, honestly, the most annoying to me are pagans. Only because they have a tendency to accept so many really wacky things that are just so obviously bad ideas. You'll find a lot of the anti-vax and natural health remedy people in the pagan movement.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. So people who just accept conspiratorial ideas without rationally considering them for just a moment are inordinately frustrating to me.
Well, that would describe a lot of atheists, actually.
That's true. Yes.
That is absolutely 100% true.
Yes, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. Kat, give us your take.
Okay. Well, it's funny because you bring it up. There was a study that was done, and in that study, it determined that atheists are just like everybody else. You're people. You're going to meet certain people that you're with one personality. in one subgroup and different groups and one fundamentalist group or an atheist group, and you're going to meet, they're going to be all different. They're all going to just be human beings. So to answer your question, it really depends on the individual and not necessarily the group and what is the context of the conversation. This may come as a shock, and some people are going to think I'm really weird here. I've met Ray Comfort a couple times, and I've had conversations with him. Besides just, small talk and laughing, joking around with the banana sort of thing. And he is not a horrible guy to deal with on that level. Now, there are a couple of names that I don't think that they ever let their guard down to where they are just being a person. And I guess that's one of I like authentic, and I don't like it when people are fake. So when you are constantly dealing with, all I'm going to do is this circular argument, it's like, I'm not going to talk to you. Go away. And that's
Right.
pretty much how I feel about that.
Right. Somebody's either making eggs or playing the spoons.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sorry about that again.
That's okay. That's okay.
Greg, what are your thoughts?
Well, I very strongly identify with what Brian said. I think that a lot of the most frustrating things for me comes from people who are simply overconfident in bad skepticism or in some mysticism and things of that nature. But honestly, the most frustrating group I have to deal with is people. Now, I'm going to preface this. I love my mother-in-law to death. She's a wonderful woman. However, anytime anything even remotely controversial comes up, she's like, let's not talk about that. It's Mother's Day, it's Father's Day, it's Wednesday, it doesn't matter what day it is. There's always a reason not to talk about it. And oh no, that's the people who avoid talking about the things that I'm passionate about, that other people are passionate about. And even if they don't want to talk about it, they don't want other people to talk about it when they're even around. That really frustrates me. And I use my mother-in-law because she does it all the time, but I know that she knows how much I love her. But other people doing the same thing. I mean, I talked earlier about how important it is to try to diffuse the situation, but there's a difference between diffusing a situation when there's no bomb to diffuse and diffusing an extremely volatile situation. So that is the hardest one to deal with for me, is the people who don't want to deal with anything.
I'd like to thank all of you guys for being on the show, and have a wonderful 4th of July. And Greg, it's very customary to have you close us out in prayer. Would you do so, sir?
Let's see. In honor of having Sarah here.
And could you take it seriously this time, please?
This is in honor of having Sarah here with her upcoming conference. I think I may want to pitch this one over to you. Do you have any pastafarian closing for us, Sarah?
That is a total cop-out, Greg. You know that.
I mean, I can give you a strong ramen.
There you go.
May his newly appendage ascend upon you all. Ramen.
Thank you, guys. And this has been the Cult of Honesty, and we are moving forward together, and we can do it with lots of respect. Let's keep being intellectually honest about it all, and let's have meaningful conversations, or at least learn how to. Okay, bye-bye.